Yesterday there was a taco moment after Donald Trump said he was going to do a genocide on Iran. And then he backed away from it at the last moment. And there's obviously some details that they're not covering adequately on mainstream news. And I'm going to give you some commentary on it. Let's go.
In just a few hours, the Pentagon will provide an update on Operation Epic Fury as President Trump reveals a ceasefire between Iran has now been reached.
The commander-in-chief posting in part, quote, "I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate."
The president says this marks a big day for world peace, revealing the next steps for the region. Quote, "The United States of America will be helping with the traffic buildup in the Strait of Hormuz. There will be lots of positive action. Big money will be made. Iran can start the reconstruction process. We'll be loading up with supplies of all kinds and just hanging around in order to make sure that everything goes well."
Here to break down the latest peace proposal is Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst live in Tel Aviv. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, hey, Lawrence, good morning. It was truly the 11th hour down to the wire when President Trump announced this ceasefire agreement shortly after the Iranians put out a statement matching the president's and then proceeded to launch missiles and drones at Gulf countries and U.S. ally Israel. Here's what it looked like in Tel Aviv after the ceasefire was announced.
So one of the funniest things about this instance was, of course, the fact that a lot of the pro-Israel spokespeople on the internet were instantly complaining and saying, what do you mean? This is supposed to be a dual ceasefire, which, for the record, a ceasefire means both parties agree to it regardless, right? Like a dual ceasefire is redundant. And yet they had to say it's a dual ceasefire because Israel usually never ceases to fire. So when they got a little taste of that medicine back, immediately they were complaining. There was obviously my favorite Israel propagandist, my favorite Hasbarist last night, who was saying, like, look what they're doing to us. You know, sirens over Tel Aviv again. He said, breaking, nonstop Iranian, Eyal Yacobi says, breaking, nonstop Iranian missiles raining down on Tel Aviv less than 2 hours into the ceasefire. Since the ceasefire began, Iran has attacked Israel, Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Where is the outrage? I said, oh, you don't like it when one side doesn't cease its fire during a ceasefire. Interesting. Because in every single one of these circumstances, it's like you only get to violate these rules over and over again because you operate in this might makes right environment. And all of a sudden, if you have another adversary in the region that is mighty enough, when the shoe's on the other foot, you don't like it. Okay? I don't know what the reasoning for why the Iranian missile strikes were while the ceasefire was supposedly agreed upon. Having said that, Israel very clearly did not want this ceasefire to take place anyway. They were very frustrated. They were not cut in on this deal, as I talked to with Trita Parsi earlier, and they were losing their minds on the timeline. It turns out that they were not cut in on the fact that the ceasefire was even taking place at all. I assume that it's a byproduct of the Mosaic system that they have, which is decentralized. There's no central communications hub in the Iranian defenses, so these different hubs were still continuing to pummel because they didn't get the message that the ceasefire had been implemented. So Israel, on the other hand, this morning, started slamming Beirut and southern Lebanon, killing hundreds of people in what the Lebanese side said was the most intense bombing that they've withstood since the beginning of this last Operation Epic Fury.
What you just saw there was an Iranian ballistic missile with a cluster warhead, those bomblets raining down on Israel's second largest city of Tel Aviv. This came after the ceasefire was announced by President Trump and an indication that it will take time to get this agreement in place. Now, since the overnight hours, the fire has stopped toward Israel, but has continued toward Gulf countries. The agreement, in part, appears to be holding, but we're looking now at the details of this deal. The Wall Street Journal reports on Iran's proposed plan that includes 10 separate points. Some of them include the U.S. guaranteeing a non-aggression pact with Iran, continuing Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program, removal of all primary sanctions on Iran, removal of secondary sanctions, an end of all UN Security Council resolutions against Iran, an end to the IAEA's resolutions on Iran's nuclear program, compensation payment for Iran and its war damage, withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region, and a ceasefire on all fronts. Those are a number of points that are not going to be reached, and the next 2 weeks are going to be critical as negotiators try to hammer this out. Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posted a statement on X overnight agreeing with the president about the ceasefire, saying Israel also supports the U.S. effort to ensure that Iran no longer poses a nuclear, missile, and terror threat to America, Israel, Iran's Arab neighbors, and the world. The 2-week ceasefire does not include Lebanon. We're also getting a look inside of Iran today, where pro-government demonstrators gathered and chanted in the streets of the Iranian capital here in Tehran. They chanted death to America, death to Israel. They were burning U.S. flags and chanting victory in the aftermath of this nearly 40-day war that erupted in the region with the beginning of Operation Epic Fury. So right now, the entire world looking at this 2 weeks to see if some of these details can be worked out for a ceasefire agreement. But it is a delicate moment.
And for the record, this could have been a total ceasefire hoax to forcibly lower the price of the oil barrel, which worked, for the record. It went from $114 approximately down to like 90. I don't know where it's at currently. But is that good enough for Donald Trump to advance and ensure that this ceasefire holds, which would require restraining Israel, as I've said, bringing Israel to heel? That is the primary focus of American foreign policy. It should have been the primary focus of American foreign policy since October 8th, 2023. And we've moved in the exact opposite direction. A lot of people at the State Department under Biden understood that this was a necessity, and some even quit their jobs publicly because Biden wouldn't do it. And now there are even people in the Trump administration that recognize that we have to restrain Israel. We have the power and capabilities of restraining Israel, but we're choosing not to. And any kind of leaning in the direction of Israel is going to have devastating consequences for the entire world. And we're seeing that unfold. We've been seeing that unfold for the past 39 days. And yet, seemingly, there's no restraint being demonstrated from, or no restraint being demanded even from the Trump side. That's where we're at. And considering the fact that it's clear that not only did America nor Israel actually achieve any of its strategic military objectives, and on top of that, created this global panic that obviously had some pressures on Donald Trump. It's clear that the reporting that stated that America was the one that was pushing for this ceasefire is most likely real, right? Some might say it's propaganda. Oh, you're just doing resistance propaganda. But it's obvious that there was one party that was no longer willing to engage in this war, and that was the United States of America. I truly do believe that Iran wanted to set up sufficient deterrence. And if America doesn't think that this sufficient military deterrence was established and thinks it can continue waging this war, upping the ante, targeting more civilian targets, killing more civilians in general, and trying to turn a country of 93 million people into Gaza in the sufficient time frame that is necessary, where they are not capable of destroying the global energy markets permanently, they're going to go back into it. They're going to go back into it. But there is the Financial Times reporting that I'm obviously leaning into that says U.S. directly pushed Pakistan to arrange a ceasefire deal while talking about escalation. So they were, on the timeline, they were posturing in this barbaric manner, but behind closed doors, they absolutely were begging for a deal. They were begging to stop the bleeding, right? It makes sense. It makes sense when you think about the war objectives that were not accomplished at all. And not only that, but also Donald Trump personally admitted that initially that they thought that the Iranian demands were quite reasonable, that there was the workings of a negotiation, right? There's the workings of a actual negotiation there. And the Iranian demands, the 10-point demands that they've made, have not changed since day one. So what changed? Well, what changed is the calculation, right? This doesn't mean that Iran has unlimited striking capabilities, because I have seen a lot of people, some of the resistance Twitter that constantly talks about the IRGC or Hamas or any number of different resistance fronts as though they are pawns in this game that they're playing on the internet in a way that's not dissimilar to how like the pro Ukraine, pro NATO Twitter talks about Ukrainians and how they have to consistently wage war. Resistance Twitter was mad. They're like, what are you doing? You need to blow up Israel further. Like, this is so stupid. And it's like, Iran doesn't have unlimited munitions. And the Iranian government's primary focus is still to maintain sovereignty, right? And ensure that their people are not being slaughtered. So they understand their limitations as well, which is, I think, the reason why they were fine. They thought that maybe they had established sufficient military deterrence. They had done enough economic damage that America would actually finally come to the table and treat them as a serious partner. Okay? Iran doesn't have unlimited munitions, and Iran doesn't have unlimited appetite for death and destruction. You have to understand that. They are thinking about this very clearly. They've demonstrated sufficient restraint in the past, and now they've demonstrated sufficient military deterrence. But they obviously interpret the battle conditions in a way that's a lot in a way that's much more strategic than random Twitter users. Okay, I don't think their capacity plays part in the specific war at all. No, there's a limit. As long as the war wages on, there's also a lot of economic damage that they're taking. Okay, their facilities are being destroyed. Their railways are being bombed by Israel, which is what happened yesterday. They don't want their power plants to fucking to be bombed into oblivion. That is not just tremendous economic damage, but that will cause a lot of deaths. Okay, so from their perspective, they've been able to show the world that they have the capability to force America to concede. Whichever, from this point on, as long as America abides by these conditions, then they're good. Now they can rebuild, right? That was the goal. Their primary focus here is to ensure that there's sanctions relief and to ensure that America actually restrains Israel so they can have some regional stability. It's clear that is the goal. We'll see how much appetite America has for continued death and destruction. Unless they actually threaten to withdraw from the talks, it just sounds like impotent whining, which actually invites more violations, says Matthew Petty. And I think there's some truth to that, because it's very clear that Israel is not interested in abiding by these conditions. And given that Israel has always played the role of spoiler here, you have to make it very clear that if you're Iran, you have to make it very clear that like you have to restrain Israel. Okay? Galibaf released this statement on the violation of the 3 key clauses of the 10-point proposal agreed framework before the start of the negotiations. The deep historical distrust we hold towards the United States stems from its repeated violations of all forms of commitments, a pattern that has regrettably been replaced once again. As the President of the United States has clearly stated in his Truth, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a workable basis on which to negotiate in the main framework for these talks. However, 3 clauses of this proposal have been violated so far. Number 1, non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon, a commitment that Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif also explicitly referred to and declared as an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and other regions effective immediately. This includes anywhere and everywhere where there's an axis of resistance force, including Gaza as well. It's not just Lebanon, but there is, I think, a little bit of miscommunication that's taking place here. on the American side. It might be strategic miscommunication or it might be genuine miscommunication. Regardless, the entry of an intruding drone into Iranian airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lar in the Fars province, in clear violation of the clause prohibiting further violation of Iranian airspace, and the denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause of the framework. Now, the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began. In such a situation, a bilateral ceasefire negotiations is unreasonable. If you understand that your enemy does not respond to anything but force, does not respond to anything but military deterrence, that's the only way that they engage in restraint. You have to go back to what's been working for you. Okay? And like I've said, I think there are international partners here that have to play a much larger role in demanding that America restrain Israel, or maybe even demand Israel cease its attempts if they want the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened again, right? But considering how much Israel firsters have been frustrated when the ceasefire was even released, it doesn't seem to be the case that there's enough appetite internally in the American government to go back to implementing some sort of ceasefire here. I think it almost feels like a repeat of Russian failures and a repeat of even the Western agitation and the Western interest in continuing the maximalist demands being made on their side with the unjustifiable and illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. I don't know. I don't know where we go, but what I can tell you is that the Strait of Hormuz is no longer open for business. I'm happy that the worst possible outcome has been avoided. Donald Trump engaging in the nuclear option, or the worst possible outcome of Donald Trump blowing up the energy grid in its entirety in Iran, has been avoided for the time being. So that's good, especially because that was the threat. But it's obvious that there are a lot of forces that are frustrated by this. Here is some of them. Eli Afriat says, the time has come. Instead of Israel and the U.S. eliminating the regime is bombing Israel. Dear Trump, what did you do all this for? E. Fatlow says, the ceasefire is disappointing. At the end of the day, the people of the West have prioritized their own needs over the liberation of the people of Iran. I don't have enough fingers to count the amount of people who have ranted at me about gas prices for the last few weeks. Kosher says, I don't know how to feel about this. Noah Magid says, this makes me sick. Dr. Eli David says, what the f***? Trump just shared a Rakshi's post that he accepted the regime's 10-point proposal. As a reminder, here's the 10-point proposal. This, of course, will be seen as weakness by the entire Middle East, says Yoav Kaufman. A ceasefire is a very bad idea for the future, for the Iranian people, for Israel and the USA, and basically the whole civilization. Oriel, I don't like it at all. This is a weak move and a wrong move. Finish the job. Terminate the regime. Noah Magid, I don't give a f*** about the Strait of Hormuz. Daniel Rubenstein, Iran has not conceded anything. Spring in Iran. I'm so angry, dejected, and heartbroken right now. Trump instantly went from hero to zero, says Oren Haas. Are you disappointed with the ceasefire? Asks Vivid Prowess, all the way from India. Noah Magid again. I'm disgusted. A fake ceasefire with terrorists while we're in shelters, missiles over our heads, while millions of innocent Iranians have lost hope. Yoav Kaufman, what good does a ceasefire do for anyone but Iran? Donald Trump, fine. Here's a ceasefire. Islamic Republic presses send on ballistic missiles to Israel. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's very obvious. It's very obvious that the Israeli population is not very happy about this, or at least some of the mouthpieces, not very happy about the ceasefire. They wanted the death and destruction campaign to continue. They wanted to kill more Iranians. They wanted to destabilize Iran. They wanted to destroy Iran. And they don't care if the rest of the planet collapses into this massive energy crisis. Very selfish. Okay? Unbelievably selfish. Why are we not telling Israel to suck it? We are the United States of America. We are the hegemonic superpower, at least for the time being. Why don't we act like it? All of this, of course, erodes the confidence that even some of Israel's most loyal supporters have from the American side of things. So, nevertheless, we continue. We continue the battle that's waging. Here's what J.D. Vance had to say.
First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on. I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. First of all,
this also makes it virtually impossible to deal with the United States of America or Israel. If you're a foreign adversary, if you're a nation in the periphery, how the can you ever trust America to hold its word? Like, it's crazy. This is a very different dynamic. We live in a different world now. 39 days ago, we existed in a totally different reality. We are no longer in that reality. And I don't think people in positions of power at the highest ranks in the American administration recognize that. Okay? I don't think they recognize that at all. Meanwhile, Shabazz Sharif openly stated ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon. How many times will we have to keep quoting the direct words of Trump Vance teams as mediator? It is insane the low regard these people hold us in. The United States literally texted Prime Minister Sharif what to say on Twitter, and it included Lebanon. Exactly. We know it. We know they copy pasted it. It's ridiculous, right? It's totally ridiculous. It's sloppy misinformation that doesn't even work any longer. I think people have hardened their positions against Israel and against Israel's malignant influence on American foreign policy and sometimes even domestic policy, as a matter of fact. And there's no way to change that dynamic. But what also doesn't make sense is that America is still operating as though it has the capability of doing unlimited death and destruction. It has the capabilities of achieving its strategic military goals, and they're just simply not doing that. But they could, right? Like, you talk like this, and you act as though there's miscommunication. You say it's propaganda only if you actually have the military might to back it up. And it's very clear, given that America was consistently demanding a ceasefire, that they also, at a certain point, recognize that they don't have that capacity any longer. So on the one hand, they're still behaving like they could bring Iran to heel, but also on the other hand, they don't have the force to show it. Or at least they don't have the appetite for further death and destruction, especially while Iran continues to close the Strait of Hormuz and dominate what takes place in the energy markets, or has a say in what takes place in the energy crisis that will unfold. It's clear, and Myrov is correct. Netanyahu will absolutely use Lebanon to torpedo this after defense officials made clear Hezbollah disarmament is not a realistic goal in this current operation. So we know the reason the press on it is for domestic politics, but it's not just domestic politics. I think this is like Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu is not just like responsive to like domestic pressures here. I think this is the overall goal is like, they're pretty open about it. Like, they think Iran is far weaker than it's ever been. The Iranian axis of resistance, the Iranian-backed axis of resistance, have been diminished in its capacity to restrain Israel militarily. That is true, right? So they think this is the only time where they can ever do this. This is the last possible moment for them, especially because what they did in the process caused tremendous anger towards Israel, and they've lost their base of support in the Western populations. No one will ever see Israel the same ever again, and therefore it's going to be much more difficult for these countries to continue being reliable allies to Israel, both on the political front, where they can offer political cover in the United Nations, or even when it comes to offering military aid to Israel directly. So this is their last shot. That's the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu wants to sully this deal, because he wants to keep dominating Iran. And we've already known, because I read pieces of this New York Times article yesterday. We know that this was always like the Israeli goals that they suggested to Donald Trump in an effort to get him into pulling the trigger was a lie. It was built around complete lies. The idea that this would be just like Venezuela, demonstrable lie, right? The idea that they could foment enough instability internally to destabilize the regime if it didn't turn into like a Venezuela-style operation where they decapitate the existing leadership and the new leadership that comes in is much more pliant to American demands. Also a lie. The idea that they could successfully attrit Iranian strike capabilities against the Gulf and Israel, also a lie. That didn't happen. The idea that Iran wouldn't even strike the Gulf states was immediately disproven, right? So here we are.
In the region and a lot of moving parts. Guys?
Hey, Trey, so you obviously were reporting there on strikes that were still coming into Israel. There are reports that strikes are still happening in the region. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this morning there were reports of explosions on 2 Iranian islands and at least 1 oil facility off the coast of Iran, an indication that the United States or Israel is still conducting airstrikes against the Iranian regime. But it also comes amid new incoming fire toward Gulf countries. Both Kuwait and the UAE have reported dozens of ceasefire violations. We're talking about drones and missiles being launched over the Persian Gulf toward these countries. And so it raises questions about if this ceasefire is actually in place, if this is an issue of getting the command down to some of these lower IRGC officials in the south of the country. But what we have seen in the aftermath of that announcement by President Trump is a variety of ceasefire violations by the Iranians that has included ballistic missile fire toward Israel and drone and cruise missile attacks toward Gulf countries.
So, Trey, speak to the enriched uranium. It still remains a key issue in all of this. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I've been talking with Israeli officials this morning, and they have been relatively quiet, simply responding, we need to get the job done. They raise a lot of questions about Iran's enriched uranium and questions about if this will be able to be addressed at the negotiating table. They pointed out that nothing has changed from the early days of Operation Epic Fury. And you remember U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff talking about how the Iranians first entered into negotiations before this war began, saying that they had enough highly enriched uranium to create 11 nuclear bombs. Israeli officials are asking, where is that enriched uranium? And if the United States believes that as a result of these 2 weeks, they'll be able to get a deal that addresses this nuclear threat. One official said, we don't want Iran to turn into North Korea. And there are serious questions that still remain about the ability to secure that highly enriched uranium, the main reason that this operation began.
Trey, there are 2 things in the 10-point proposal that are really the biggest red flags, according to all the articles I've read and according to us. Number 1 is the acceptance of the enrichment. They want to continue to enrich uranium. We can never allow them to do that. In fact, we want to go in and try to get that enriched uranium that is buried underground. So, but then I'm reading.
That question is how? Like, if we have the capability to do so, why haven't we done it? You know, everybody talks about what we should be doing, but at the end of the day, it literally turns into don't siege Leningrad, just take it. Okay. All the armchair generals on television just keep demanding that America do something that is clearly outside of their capabilities. Because if it was within their capabilities, they would do it. Like, do we feel like America has this power and they're just simply not doing it because they love Iran or something? Like they want Iran to have the enriched uranium? What a stupid demand this is. It's been 39 days. Obviously, if America could do it without putting boots on the ground and engaging in potentially a decades-long conflict with Iran, that will be devastating for every party involved in it and all of the other forces in the region, that will only continue the pain that the global energy markets experience. In the absence of that, it's clearly not in the cards for Donald Trump and the American forces to go in and like take out the enriched uranium. There's one way to do it, or there was rather one way to do it. It had happened in the past, and that was with the JCPOA. If you want to restrain Iran's nuclear grade enriched uranium capacity, if you want to restrain Iran's nuclear capacity, there was one way that we had successfully done that, right? It was with the JCPOA. Barack Obama did it. Donald Trump ripped it apart. It's clear that there's no other outcome here. And it shouldn't take tens of billions, almost $100 billion of loss and the loss of American troops from the American perspective, because they clearly don't care about the people that they're killing. But it shouldn't take all of that for America to finally come to that conclusion. And it seems to me like America is still not at that conclusion, even if behind closed doors, they're communicating as though they've reached that conclusion. Because that's the other element here. Behind closed doors, they're begging for a deal. America is, right? In public, they're saying, oh, Iran is begging us for a deal. It's over for Iran. We've destroyed them. Look at how mighty our military is, right? But the reality of the matter is they understand that they don't have the capability to do this. They don't have the power to do this without engaging in a potential decades-long boots-on-the-ground invasion of a country that is much larger than any other country that we've invaded, that has 93 million people in it, many armed combatants that have a lot more experience in engaging in counterinsurgency and insurgent-style asymmetric warfare. And unlike Afghanistan or unlike Iraq, there's also clearly a strategic choke point that they are controlling. Elon Levy says if President Trump lets the Iranians charge a toll for ships in the Strait of Hormuz, then every time you fill up your car at the pump, you will put money straight in the pockets of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This will be a humiliating disaster for the United States. Mortaza says this is hilarious because Israel is currently inflicting a global economic crisis on the world by continuing the war and even overriding any attempt to ceasefire and generating extreme anger in the process by people far from the conflict whose material interests are being harmed. Now that there's an obvious split emerging between the United States and Israeli positions, foreign countries can safely engage in economic boycotts, derecognition of passports, and other measures targeting Israel until it ceases the war without having to confront Washington. That is what has to happen. There's also the other side of this, obviously, the Democrats and the prominent Democrats that are supposed to be the prominent Democrats that are supposed to be like celebrating the fact that Donald Trump is retreating from the absolute worst elements of his goals, absolute worst goals that he had of like death and destruction, full blown genocide campaign. Chris Murphy went on CNN and was like, "Oh, this ceasefire is unbelievable. I hope it's not real. I hope it's not real at all."
Stand out here. One, the safe passage that Trump is saying is going to be provided.
This is what he said last night, and then he continued to say even more unhinged things.
Weeks as part of this, kind of the central part of it, through Hormuz. They're saying is possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces, which obviously implies that Iran controls the strait. And then from the National Security Council, they say this confers upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing in terms of them regulating passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So what do you hear in all this?
I mean, listen, who knows what's going on? Donald Trump lies every single day. Clearly, he's not telling the truth. But if you accept even part of the Iranian statement, Donald Trump has agreed to give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz. That is extraordinary. If you go deeper into the statement from the Iranian National Security Council, they claim that Trump has also agreed to Iran's right to enrichment, to suspend all sanctions against Iran, and to allow Iran to keep their missile program, their drone program, and their nuclear program. Now, who knows if any of that is true, but if at the very least this agreement gives Iran the right to control the strait, that is cataclysmic for the world. And it is just stunning that that's...
Like, how can Democrats not understand that this is horrible messaging, right? Like, this literally proves what I've been saying all along, what we've been seeing all along, which is the idea that Democrats are not actually against destroying Iran, blowing up Iran, and waging war with Iran. They just get to sit there and act as though this wasn't in the cards for them. This wasn't their desire at all. This is no different than the same energy presented by Chuck Schumer in that famous Taco Trump. Trump always chickens out. If you're going to cut a side deal and negotiate with Iran without telling us, like, that's bull. You have to bomb them. It's the same shit. And this is the most transparent version of that sentiment, where instead of saying, look, we should have never gotten into this predicament to begin with, and although it's a worse position overall for Donald Trump, I'm glad that there's finally a pathway towards a ceasefire, long-lasting peace in the region. But instead of saying that, they're saying we could have done it better. We could have continued this war in a more effective manner. Or saying Donald Trump should continue this war in a more effective manner to absolutely destroy the Iranian nuclear capabilities. Like, there's no alternative here. They don't even present the alternative that Democrats famously advanced. Use the JCPOA. Say this is a worse deal overall from an American perspective than even the JCPOA. But it doesn't matter. Like, it's clear that we have to negotiate with these people. It's clear that we have to engage with Iran in diplomacy rather than constantly warmongering. All of this is unnecessary. All of this was unnecessary. We learned a hard lesson. But as you know, as people with clear minds and good conscience, we should now turn around and say, all right, we're just gonna diplomatically engage with Iran. Commend Donald Trump even for following through on this, regardless of how tyrannical he is. But they're not doing that. What they're doing instead is agitating Trump. And what they don't realize is this makes them look consistent. This makes them look like cowards. It makes them look weak. Okay? To the average person, they might not care about what happens to the Iranian people, but they don't like that the war is continuing and their gas prices are going up. And the Democrats are supposed to be in opposition to that, right? At least they're trying to communicate their opposition to that. But when they come out when a ceasefire is imminent and they say, oh, well, this is a massive failure for Trump. What the f are you doing? You should, you didn't achieve any of the strategic goals, and don't actually provide any counter or don't actually commend even an attempt towards diplomacy, even if Donald Trump is inconsistent on that front and most likely will not pursue diplomacy and try to create a long-lasting ceasefire here, long-lasting stability in the region. You're basically saying to the average person that's watching, to your base, is that you would be more violent than Donald Trump. You would have done a much better job of bringing Iran to heel, utilizing the same resources that Donald Trump is utilizing right now. And this is the major problem. Democrats are not in disagreement with killing Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Democrats are not in disagreement overall with engaging Iran militarily, right? They actually want it, and they like that Trump did it, and now they can act as though they were always in opposition to it. But even then, they don't present a strong enough opposition. They don't actually try to get people on the record with the War Powers Resolution when they should have. Right now, they're talking about it, but they should have done this months ago at this point, right? And they consistently say, oh, it's the process. It's the process that we disagree with. You didn't ask us for advice. You didn't ask us for confirmation. The process. You should be undermining the argument in its entirety. Why are we waging war with Iran to begin with? It's unbelievable. And while Americans, like I said, are maybe not as careful or considerate about the everyday existence of ordinary Iranians and what we're doing to them right now, they do see their tax dollars light on fire, and they do know what it looks like when they're paying, $20 extra at the pump. They see that. They see that as a negative impact, and they also tie this back directly to Israel. They know that we're waging this war because this is Israel's goals that we're accomplishing. Okay? So for liberals to try to frame this as like we would have actually accomplished Israel's war better than Trump, well, that's a idiotic argument to present. You look silly. You're not even utilizing the moment. You're not even taking advantage of the moment to set a clear distinction between yourself and the Trump administration. I can't believe it. They're proving exactly what I've been saying all along. Well, we've been saying all along. Democrats, having spent 5 weeks doing nothing but silently go along with Trump's barbaric war, are now complaining that he chickened out. They are going on cable news and lamenting the fact that Trump didn't commit a genocide tonight. Deeply, deeply unserious people. Scum, even. They're doing the same technique again. They're saying, diet fascism. We would have done restrained fascism, diet fascism. We would have done more organized fascism.
Ceasefire looks like very good news for the global economy. Very good news for anyone filling up at a British petrol station too. But there's expectation and then there's reality. Reality is a bit messy. We'll talk about why that is. But first of all, look, here's the good news. Oil prices. They had been going up, of course, because of this conflict, going up very sharply. They are now going down. They're still higher, way higher than they were before, but at least they are not still going up. And that's the same for gas prices too. They are coming down at the same time. Now, that is because a lot of this relies on passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And here we're going to start talking about the reality. This shows traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Again, you can see exactly when the war started. That traffic really plunges. That's why it was such a threat to the global economy, to people filling up petrol here and all around the world. So what has been happening since the Strait was declared open? Well, we've been tracking this using marine traffic. And since the ceasefire was announced, in the hours up to that point, we've only seen 2 vessels go through. And look where they've gone through. These are bulk carriers. They've gone through Iranian waters. Actually, one started in Iranian waters before they make their way out. So this isn't perhaps what we might be expecting in terms of global shipping getting moving again. And bear in mind that route. It's really important, close to Iran. So this is the Strait of Hormuz, sort of map form. This is how it usually works. That red line, ships go through there unimpeded. They just go about their normal business, and that means you can get a lot of volume, a lot of stuff in and out. This green dotted line is the Iran-controlled route. We've seen ships taking that throughout this conflict. The fact that even with the Strait open, ships are still taking this route suggests Iran is maintaining control. So what is happening here? If the Strait's open, why aren't ships going through it? Well, there's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of that is down to maybe different statements, different conceptions of what opening the Straits means. We've got Donald Trump on the left, his statement, and Iran's foreign ministry on the right. We don't have to...
I think it's pretty clear what it is, right? For people who are aware of what's going on, yeah, no, you can... well... In the initial ceasefire proposal, it was very obvious that, like, Iran, as long as you pay a toll to Iran, you can get safe passage. They were most likely going to start processing those payments automatically rather than having them port, like rather than having them go to one of their ports to dock, and instead just go through whatever payment processor that they have, make that payment, go through easily, right? But then obviously Israel struck Lebanon and Iran was like, all right, fuck you. Strait of Hormuz is closed. Anyway, there's a new statement from Trump. President Trump issued a statement following his meeting with Secretary General Rutte. NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland, that big, poorly run piece of ice. Awesome. I like that he's threatening the European Union and threatening NATO allies by once again threatening to invade Greenland militarily. Yeah, that's cool. He's giving the game away, right? I guess after receiving the same blowjob over and over again, you kind of get bored of it, right? You would assume Mark Rutte developed new techniques of sucking him off from the back and maybe, applying pressure to his G-spot or something to like switch it up a little bit, but kind of feels like this time around, Trump was like, you sucked me the same way. I need a new suck. I need a new suck, Mark. You're not sucking great. You got to put your tongue in it, Mark. Bring in Laura Loomer. She's a free spirit. She will lead the way. And then Politico thought it was crazy to compare him to Hitler. Yeah, I don't think anyone thinks it's crazy to compare him to Hitler. I think it's a controversial enough statement that they're trying to tie back. But again, it's as bad as you make it as the candidate. And I think Abdul dealt with that so well in the moment where he was like, what are you talking about? You just threatened to do genocide. What the f do we call that? Another good one you can also say is, oh, wow, the guy the guy I had on the stump, called Donald Trump Hitler. Well, so did his vice president and his HHS secretary. So he's not alone in that, you know, because they did do that. RFK Jr. and JD Vance have both called Donald Trump Adolf Hitler. So
read through all of that, but let's see what they said about the Strait. So Donald Trump talks about the complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait, whereas Iran's foreign minister, he was a little more nuanced, a little more maybe in the reality of this. He said for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. Two really important points. Armed forces, that suggests Iran is in control, at least according to its foreign ministry, and with due consideration of technical limitation. That is putting the brake on it. We're not just going to see traffic moving, even if companies wanted to move. That is suggestion there'll be technical limitations, that it will be slightly throttled. We won't be going back to pre-conflict levels of traffic, and that's before we even consider reports that Iran is going to charge ships to move through this. So the upshot of all that is fuel prices here may remain high for some time. So you've got diesel prices here in black, you've got petrol and green diesel a lot higher. It's increased because we have to import a lot more of it, but both have had that rapid rise. They may stay high for a bit longer. And then the cost of shipping, that also surged with war. It has come down a bit too. Again, there's a bit of expectation there because you're building weeks, months in advance. But this is all contingent on the Strait being open as built. At the moment, it doesn't seem like that is the case. And it's the nature of a ceasefire. This isn't the end of a war. This is a ceasefire. There is a lot of uncertainty still to come.
Day 40 of the war could have been apocalypse now, instead of which it feels like apocalypse postponed, because both sides have agreed to a 2-week pause, a ceasefire, while they try to work something out. The Americans have submitted a 15-point set of red lines via Pakistan, which is being considered, and the Iranians have submitted a 10-point series of red lines via Pakistan, which the Americans are thinking about. And President Trump said about this 10-point Iranian series of demands that he thought it was a workable basis for negotiation. That's very curious when you consider some of the things that are in these 10 points. One thing that's in these 10 points is an Iranian demand that the Americans close their bases in the Middle East and withdraw their troops. Now, this is a view of some of the...
Well, perhaps that's a workable solution because those bases have been rendered inoperable. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are they going to do? If anything, they're doing America a favor. So now they don't have to they don't have to go back and rebuild the things when it's clear that they're not really invested in the security of the countries anyway. And who knows what the GCC's attitude will be, you know, when all this is said and done.
Main bases, not all of them by any means, but some of the main bases in the region. There are 40,000 American troops normally in the Middle East, plus the 8,000 or so extra who have arrived there in light of this particular crisis. The chances of the United States withdrawing troops, still less closing bases, which have been open for many years, is absolutely zero. They just won't do it. Another Iranian demand is that they be allowed to maintain their civil nuclear power capacity. And they've always said this. We want to be a civil nuclear power, and they say we have no desire to develop a nuclear weapon. Now, they've been lying about that for the last 20-odd years, and presumably they'll continue lying about it.
Why?
But here's the other issue. In their main nuclear plants, these three were hit.
Why? Why are they lying? This is what's so annoying. It's just automatic. Anyone that says, I don't think that's the case, actually. Let me tell you what the truth actually looks like. Immediately, you're like, oh, here we go. Another IRGC dick rider. Another Islamic Republic defender. No, man, I'm just defending the truth. Why can't we engage in truthful discourse? If you got a biased position against Iran, you can say that you're biased against it. But at least say the truth. It's so annoying.
By the United States, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, not Bushehr in the south. They were hit last year. And somewhere in the rubble of those three plants, it is believed that the Iranians have got 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium, enriched to about 60%, highly enriched uranium. It may be under the rubble of Isfahan, maybe it's under the rubble of Natanz, maybe it's been split up into two.
You know what's so annoying about it too? What he just casually said right there, no one agrees with. Like, no one, the International Atomic Energy Agency disagrees with that statement, and they are obviously the most knowledgeable, right? The only people that repeat this lie, or where this lie comes from, is Israel, and also by way of Israel, America. Your own governments don't believe this. It's just so stupid.
2 or 3 tranches, or maybe it is under
the CIA and the U.S. State Department also don't agree with that sentiment or agree with that assessment either. But at least like American politicians will say it, right? Like they advance that lie. Even if the actual intelligence shows the exact opposite reality, at least there's like American politicians who lie about it and Israeli politicians who lie about it.
Underneath Pickaxe Mountain, which was built near the Natanz plant, and it's very, very deep, very inaccessible, and it's possible that the Iranians moved their uranium into Pickaxe Mountain before the attack of June last year. Either way, the United States is not going to get its hands on this 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium, whatever it says about Iran's nuclear ambitions for the future.
Yeah.
But of course,
it's so funny because the source that they're using to talk about where the power plants are is the International Atomic Energy Agency, an agency that's supposed to be tasked with like covering the nuclear programs and nuclear arsenal of every one of these countries that has them. And 90% of their work revolves around Iran for some reason, partially because North Korea won't allow them to their facilities. It's not stupid. And also partially because Israel doesn't even admit that they have nukes officially. So it is a spy agency, 100% for the record. And not only that, but there's there's a lot of suspicion that the reason why Israel knew exactly who to kill in the Iranian nuclear program, like civilian scientists, was because they got the data from the International Atomic Energy Agency, for the record. just another incredible cruelty. Another instance where we have shown our hand, we've shown our real interests, we've shown how violent and barbaric we are, how perfidious we are.
The most immediate issue is the Strait of Hormuz. And Donald Trump has said that these straits will be released as of today, that the straits will immediately become open to shipping. The Iranians have said, well, they will open in the next day or so. But here's the big issue. The normal channel in the Strait of Hormuz goes like that, right around the straits and then along the Iranian side of the Gulf itself. But in the last few days, those ships that they've been allowing through have had to take a different route via the toll booth. And this is where they have to go north of Larak Island and effectively pay their tolls before they get out of the Gulf again. Because in Larak Island, the Iranians can take a good look at them. They could sink them if they wanted to. They can turn them back. And today, so far, day 40, all of the ships that have left the Gulf have been going north of Larak Island. So the Iranians are still operating their restrictive policy so far. If in the coming days they go back to the traditional shipping route, that will be a relief, but it's by no means guaranteed. Donald Trump can make lots of differences in the world. He can influence many things. One thing he can't really influence is Israel's war in Lebanon. The Iranians have said that all fighting must stop, but the Israelis have made it very clear with the most extensive attacks today on Lebanon since the 28th of February that this ceasefire is not to them. They actually will carry on with their war against Hezbollah in Lebanon, whatever happens in the Iran-United States arrangements. Which leaves President Trump claiming victory. He says that we have been completely successful diplomatically on all fronts. Well, if we look at all the things that the president has said over the last few weeks about what America's aims are, and they keep changing, but if we put them all together, the fact is not one of those aims has been unambiguously achieved. And some of them are in a worse state now than they were before he started.
This is the same exact dynamic we watched unfold when biased mainstream resources and legacy publishers that had no investment in telling the truth about what was going on the ground in Gaza would, or the ambitions of Hamas, the ambitions of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian resistance, they just misinformed their populations. They misinformed the public. And they're doing the same thing right now. And it's even dumber because at least like in that circumstance, albeit still totally unacceptable, these were not state actors. non-state actors that don't have English language communicators, non-state actors who were effectively shut out from developing a line of communication with the rest of the world, right? So it was much easier to disparage them and to refuse to listen to what their demands were. But like doing it to Iran is incredibly stupid because it's a sovereign state. It's a fully fledged country. It has a foreign minister that speaks English perfectly. And it makes it even dumber. To me, it's even dumber that they're trying to do this with Iran, where they're like, oh, what could the ambitions be here? Oh, well, America tried to achieve its military objectives, and there's miscommunication taking place in the back and forth conversation. It's like, no, there isn't. It's confusing to you if you're just not paying attention at all. It's confusing to you if you have a totally distorted framework that you're operating off of. You're totally biased, and your job is not to really look at this stuff and try to interpret it. None of this stuff is strange. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, the reason why I'm maintaining this position, is because you have to look at why this ceasefire took place. Okay? Look at why the ceasefire happened. Because America wanted it to happen. Why did America want it to happen? Because America was looking at the risk calculation, recognizing that they're incapable of reaching their military goals. They'd failed dramatically in achieving any of those military goals. They didn't deteriorate Iran's strike capabilities. They didn't even develop full air superiority over the Iranian airspace. They had no way of extracting this enriched uranium in this like super ambitious military campaign. They recognize that it's virtually impossible for them to overtake Karg Island or any number of different islands without, putting sufficient boots on the ground and developing an area like a cordon sanitaire with drones and with sufficient aerial assets. Like, it's just not going to happen. So they failed on all that. Okay, they recognized they failed on that. They understood that clearly the cards are in Iran's hands, and that's precisely the reason why they were advocating for a ceasefire behind the scenes by way of Pakistan. That's what the reality is. So any kind of conversation around this, like, oh, well, we don't know why America engaged in this. Like, well, we do know why. We know why. It's not dissimilar to the 12-Day War, when the Israeli defense munitions were deteriorated, and America had to literally stop Israel. America had to tell Israel, enough. You don't have enough munitions to defend yourselves. Ironically enough, this time around, it's been much longer than 12 days because they brought in a lot more naval assets. And even then, it's clear that Iranian missiles are striking deep inside of Tel Aviv and potentially even in the Negev desert, where a lot of the Israeli Air Force is. That's where their big air base is. And we don't even know what kind of assets that they've been able to destroy. We've only seen the success on the runways of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and many other places. We don't know how successfully they've destroyed the Israeli fleets that exist. We only have suspicions. And also on top of that, they are capable of striking industrial areas and whatnot. And it's clear that Israel is getting cooked. But they're so insane that they think, no, we'll get into the suicide pact as long as America is by our side. As long as we can achieve our main objective, which is to destroy Iran, rip it apart piece by piece, without any care or consideration for what happens to the 93 million people that live there, right? They'll do it. I do wonder if there's credence to the theory Israel's also trying to degrade America's presence in the Middle East. No, not at all. There's credence to the theory that Israel is careless and inconsiderate about what happens to the Gulf because a weaker Gulf is good for Israel. That's real. That's a real part of the objective. So the more they hit Iran and the more Iran retaliates to the Gulf, the better it is for Israel. Okay? 100%. But no, as far as like removing America's influence from the region? No, they don't agree with that at all. As a matter of fact, they still want to maintain American military presence so hard in the Gulf that they have now finally openly admitted that they're willing to turn Israel into a direct American military base. Part of that, I think, also is because, you're just cutting out the middleman there, recognizing that the Gulf is unsustainable to defend, and that America still has a foothold in the region. How is a weaker Gulf good for Israel? What do you mean? Chatter, any country in the region must be weak for Israel. Every country. The Gulf has other allies, not only China, but also Turkey, for example. Israel wants to destroy Turkey. Turkey's next after Iran. They've already Babe Ruth style called out their shot. Okay? That Turkey's next. If they engage in land acquisition or the same stuff that they're doing to Iran, but to Turkey, what do you think the Gulf is going to do? There's Turkish military base in the Gulf, like in Qatar, right? Let's say somehow Israel was able to convince America to pull Turkey out of NATO or something, right? This is hypothetical. It's ridiculous. Not going to happen, most likely. But, that's the explanation for your Israel hate. Buddy, what's really funny about that is I've been far more critical of Turkey for literally aligning with Israel. This is a relatively new phenomenon from the Israeli side. You don't know anything about anything. Turkey is the primary party involved in sending energy to the Israeli grid by way of Azerbaijan, Baku Ceyhan. There's a pipeline that goes from Azerbaijan into Turkey to ports on the southern point of Turkey with Turkish ships, Turkish tankers that take the oil and gas and deliver it to the Haifa port in Israel. Okay? The fleets that do this are owned by Erdogan's son or son-in-law, one or the other. I can't remember. Israel is still threatening to destroy NATO and Turkey because Turkey still has some semblance of sovereignty as a regional actor. America lets it happen because it's a reliable vassal state for American interests in the region, and Israel doesn't like that. Your talking points is anti-EU, even though we agree with you. You are using the same biased viewpoints that Fox News uses against you, against European media perceptions. We hate Trump. Orban is disliked. Vance lands in Hungary and helps him with Orban's election. You get that, right? Buddy, I don't think you understand. I know Europeans, I know regular Europeans despise Donald Trump. I'm saying your leadership is cucked, okay? And it's something you should understand and be sympathetic to because I'm an American citizen and my administration, my government is nowhere near as responsive as European liberal democracies are supposed to be, okay? At least I know that we don't have a real democratic process. Europe, I believe in, okay? Especially because Europe is supposed to still be independent. European Union is a powerful force on the planet still. My demand is that European leadership become more responsive to the needs of the population. That is very different than whatever the Trumpian argument against Europe really is. Okay? I've never, as a matter of fact, the reason why I say EU is so cucked is because I am totally aware that the European population wants changes. The European population is demanding changes, sometimes even more aggressively than my countrymen do, right? Look at what's happening in Italy with like strikes at ports and general strikes that take place to make demands of the Italian government to decouple from Israel, right? And yet, why do European leaders refuse to listen to those demands? Why do European leaders place democracy under threat? It's because they're vassals. They're vassals to slaves to both the interests of capital, just as our leadership is slaves to international capital here in America, right? European leaders are no different. But they're also slaves to America and by extension of America to Israel. That's precisely the reason why the overwhelming majority of European population's demands are never addressed. And instead of leaning into those popular demands, deciding to cut away from the United States of America, deciding to develop sovereignty and dignity for yourselves, for your nations, show the world that middle powers, when aligned with one another, can actually build a powerful coalition. The European Union is already there. Instead of doing that, instead of defending liberal democracy, European leadership, what does European leadership do? Time and time again, they show that they're totally cucked. Every fat American. And the same goes for Mark Carney, right? Mark Carney is the exact same situation. It's unbearable to watch. I, as an American, hope that one day these middle powers can rise up against America and demand changes. That's what my goal is. I'm saying this as an American. I'm saying show your might, show your power, develop dignity, develop sovereignty. Say no to America so that we are forced to retreat, so that hopefully we'll have more responsive politicians that will focus on American needs rather than advancing the needs of empire that don't help everyday Americans, but instead only help the needs of capital owners.